All right, everybody, let's get started. You're gonna, yeah. If you are a speaker, you're gonna come sit in one of these chairs. Yeah, sorry. Okay. We're gonna go alphabetically, so you don't have to sit alphabetically, but that's how we're going to speak. And interesting this year, I picked like F, G, H, and L for. I mean, I don't know how I did that, so it's pretty cool. What? The last names are like, yeah, it made sense to me. I'm like, yeah, it made sense to me. So, Deb, I'm standing in front of you. I'm going to the other side. I'm going to go to the other side. I'm standing in front of Deb. It's very rude. There you go. All right. You have a fidget too? All right. Maybe I'll get one. Well, welcome to our Journeys Symposium. This is still continues to be like the best kept secret at Suburban Temple-Kol. It is a wonderful program in which we hear stories from not made up stories, but stories of the lives of our members. They've been asked to answer the question, what is the impact of Judaism on my life? Some of them directly just really kept with the question. Some kind of just started writing and kept going. And that happens every year. The four answers, I do not ask to see them. I trust in what the responses will be really personal, personal and introspective. And every year we learn about our community and we learn about ourselves. And every year the speeches and stories are extraordinary, and every year they're radically different. And it's become this beloved, beautiful hour. In between each speaker, Deb brings us a piece of music. And Deb has this unbelievable repertoire and she just picks the right piece every time. I put a little pressure on you. Sorry. Here we are, Yom Kippur afternoon. We're already exhausted, and then I put pressure on you. So what to put who's going to go first, who's going to go second. I always just go alphabetical by last name. So our first speaker will then be Howard Feldenkrais, because that is an F, and that's our first speaker. So Howard is, how many years have you been a member? Okay, so Howard has been a member. I'm not going to tell much, because I learned that if I give a long bio, then I kind of mess with the speech. So Howard has been a member for a very long time, raised all of his children here, and was on our board of trustees, did a stint as our treasurer, and often entertains us. So he's very funny. So here we go. So I'm going to give you this so you don't have to hold it. You can either hold it or I can give you this. What's easier for you?
I'll just stand.
Okay, well, let's do this. You are definitely taller than me, so.
You are
Let us know, okay?
you are much more powerful. Okay, first I want to apologize. I started writing and I didn't really stop for about a couple of days, so it's a little long. And then the rabbi shouldn't always trust what people write before she reads it, but I'm going to go ahead. Thank my family for coming here today. Okay, so I'm going to make it as quick as I can. My Jewish journey starts in 1955 when I was born to Erwin and Florence Feldenkrais. I was fortunate to be brought up in a warm home full of Jewish life. My father was a true mensch and my mother was a warm and loving people person, although she was very nervous. I was the firstborn and given the name Chaim Mordechai, and shortly after I was born, we moved to a new home off Warrensville Center Road in an area I've always affectionately called the Little Israel section of South Euclid. Our home was in walking distance of Corky and Lenny's and the Warrensville Center Synagogue. My parents were both first-generation Americans, and my grandparents all emigrated from Poland, or what is now the Ukraine, around 1910 and settled into Cleveland to be around relatives. Sadly, both my grandmothers passed away shortly before or after my birth. My dad's father, who I refer to by the Yiddish term of Zeta, died about a month before my bar mitzvah, and I can't even imagine and recall how sad my dad was at that time. My parents were raised in Orthodox and kosher homes in the old Jewish Cleveland neighborhoods of Kinsman and Glenville. As typical of new immigrants to the United States at that time, my grandparents spoke a lot of Yiddish and were not very well educated by today's standards. My grandfather was a huckster. That was a guy with a cart who sold fruits and vegetables. First, he did it with a horse that he named Reuben, and then with a truck throughout the Kinsman neighborhood. As many Jewish immigrants at the time, it placed a great emphasis on maintaining their Orthodox traditions and a kosher home. We were I would consider us conservadox in that we went to an Orthodox temple, but we did drive on the Sabbath and occasionally had non-kosher food outside the home. No pork, but occasionally a McDonald's hamburger. Growing up, our family, we were members of the Warrensville Center Synagogue, or an Orthodox shul in South Euclid. Our neighborhood was almost entirely Jewish, and the Roland Elementary School, I recall that we only had usually like 29 Jews and one non-Jew, and one Republican. Corresponding. It was pretty easy to be Jewish growing up in this neighborhood, but after sixth grade, however, I migrated to junior high and then to Brush High School, where the Jewish population became smaller and smaller. It was at Greenview Junior High and Brush where names of girls such as Flora Salvatore, Debbie Bakula, Christine Walshmit, and Peggy Bush became part of my landscape, which conflicted with the no shiksa doctrine so strongly pushed down by my parents onto me. Sorry, I know I'm not supposed to say that word anymore. Our certainly not in front of my wife. Our synagogue was within walking distance of our home, and I recall walking to services with my father almost every Saturday morning along Warrensville Center Road. Occasionally, I would find a golf ball, likely misplaced by a suburban temple member playing golf at the adjoining Oakwood Country Club. Rabbi Muskin was a classic 1960s larger-than-life rabbi whose sermons contained a lot of fire and brimstone, and our cantor, Nelson Senders, had an awesome classic cantorial voice, and I used to love to hear him sing Eitz Chaim He, the prayer we just did a few minutes ago. In the Orthodox shul, the women sat in a different section, and I remember fondly always visiting my mother and my Aunt Mila sitting in the front section. There were many Europeshire members, another word for immigrants from Europe, and their first generation of children and grandkids who belonged to the Warrensville Center Synagogue. While these men could daven with the best of them, pray with the best of them, they didn't always have the greatest attention span for the service of the rabbi's sermon. And on many occasions, the din would start to grow from a soft roar and then turn into like you were at a Saturday night at Corky and Lenny's. And I remember that the rabbi or the cantor would basically stop the service. The rabbi would yell, "Friends, friends," like you were doing this morning a little bit. And but yeah, anyhow. But the hall, I recall fondly that the hall on the high holidays was filled with, just filled to the brim, the social hall and the sanctuary, and the volume of Avinu Malkeinu could go right through to your soul. I certainly wasn't the smartest kid. There was a kid, Phil Fireworker, who went to Harvard, or the most religious kid, Alan Green, for example, made Aliyah to Israel. But I was certainly one of the best singers, and I was lucky to be in the Temple Choir and was asked to finish what they call finish the service, sing of some of the closing songs on many Saturday mornings. And speaking of Europeshires, I wanted to mention my Aunt Mila. My Tante Mila was my grandfather's youngest sister. She had evaded capture by the Nazis in Krakow, Poland, while moving around frequently with their mother in tow. The story goes that she eventually made it out of Europe, but was not allowed by the British to enter Israel directly, and she instead departed the ship in Lebanon and walked to Israel. That's the kind of lady she was. Her husband, Joe, had a similarly amazing story of survival, retribution, and he too eventually made it to Israel, become a member of the Irgun, and fight for the foundation of the State of Israel. My Tante Mila eventually came to Cleveland so that her son, Art, could get an American education, which he did. He's now a professor of political science at UCLA. And Mila opened up a tailor shop on Coventry Road in Cleveland Heights. And we spent many Passover Seder's with her, and my father would read every word of the Haggadah, every word until the end, despite how long it took, which is a little different from our current day Seder's, but nonetheless. And I remember my Aunt Mila became quite a figure in the community, and she belonged to the Park Synagogue, and there was a rabbi there, Rabbi Armand Cohn. Does anybody remember Rabbi Cohn? I mean, when the guy spoke, he could shake the foundation. And I just remember being so impressed that one time while he was carrying the Torah around to conclude the Torah service, he came down the middle aisle, and he stopped and looked at my aunt and said, "Mrs. Stein, good Shabbos. Are my pants ready?" Yeah. Anyhow, being today that it's Yom Kippur, I remember two memories. My father, like I said, was a true mensch, and even though our service ended at about 8 o'clock in the evening, he would always take the time to walk an elderly lady by the name of Mrs. Vishnik to her house, and he got home even later because of that. I, on the other hand, slightly after my bar mitzvah, in an Orthodox temple where you weren't supposed to use a phone on the high holidays, I called for a pizza. And when it arrived at my house, let's just say my father was disappointed. Okay, so in addition to going to Sunday school, I went to the Cleveland Hebrew schools and their camp called Camp Oneg. Some people called it Camp 1G if they didn't know the Hebrew. It was great fun, and yeah. There was a lady there that was the director of the camp. Her name was Mrs. Aviva Orlan. Did anybody else go to Camp Oneg? No. Okay. I knew I was in a different room here. Yeah, anyhow. Oh yeah, all right, way to go. Anyhow, if you remember Mrs. Orlan, she looked like a cross between Lucille Ball and Phyllis Diller. She had a bright red hair, and I learned many, many outstanding camp songs that I still remember to this day. I do remember one day while traveling on the bus, which was marked Cleveland Bureau of Jewish Education, several people in the neighborhood started yelling, calling us kikes and Jew boys, and that was really my first memory of anti-Semitism. When I was in high school, I had the awesome experience of becoming a member of B'nai B'rith Youth Organization. We formed a local chapter in our neighborhood, and then I became an officer in the Cleveland Council, which had about 1,000 kids, 25 boy AZA chapters, and about 25 girl BBG chapters. And I became the treasurer and vice president, and that was a great religious, athletic, and leadership experience. And I'm happy to say that my daughters, Sarah and Emily, who are here today, plug, also went on to become leaders in BBYO as well. So unfortunately, I spent more time in the BBYO office planning events than I did on my studies. And my guidance counselor said I should go to the Army instead of going to college. But we didn't do that in our community. So anyhow, I went to college at Kent State, majored in social work, and then, but I decided I wasn't that nice a person, so I switched to accounting. And I honestly, I can't recall many occasions where I enriched my Jewish heritage while at Kent State. I do recall that once during my freshman year, after doing something that was new to me called binge drinking, I did, unfortunately, on the way downtown to the bars, fell ill right near the front steps of the Hilla House. And I don't really want to go into details, but needless to say, I do recall thinking, boy, my father's going to be so excited that I was at the Hilla House on Friday night. One thing that did happen to me at Kent is my freshman year. I met a very cute nursing student from Elyria, Ohio, by the name of Nancy Bedox. We did not date in college, but remained friends until we started dating a few years after college, and eventually fell in love and got married. So here's where my Jewish journey took a big left-hand turn. Nancy was not a nice Jewish girl, but in fact a nice Catholic girl. In preparing to spend the rest of our lives together, we had to agree on how to go forward with my desire for Judaism and to raise a Jewish family. While we never discussed her conversion to Judaism, I did ask Nancy to allow our children to be raised in the Jewish faith. Nancy felt strongly that our children should be raised with a religion, but if it was going to be Jewish, I was going to be mostly on my own. I will be eternally grateful for my wife's decision for our children to be raised Jewish, and her lifelong sacrifice and her lifelong assistance in this effort. I couldn't have done it without Nancy's help. So with that decision behind us, we went out to try to find a rabbi to perform our marriage ceremony. Remember, my temple affiliation with an Orthodox temple, and quite frankly, in 1982, the entire Jewish community was freaking out about intermarriage. I explored the possibilities and landed on the Reform movement, which was beginning to evaluate the concepts like patrilineal descent. To be honest, I didn't think I ever attended a religious service at a Reform synagogue. and I had once met a nice rabbi through BBYO from Temple Emmanuel, whose name will not be mentioned here. And Nancy set up a meeting, and we went to see if he would officiate at our wedding. He was quite inflexible and quite rude. So we were disappointed, but then somebody told us to speak with Rabbi Oppenheimer at Suburban Temple. And Rabbi Oppenheimer, he wanted to understand our commitment to raising a Jewish family. And after talking with us, he agreed to officiate at our wedding. I'll be grateful to Rabbi Oppenheimer for that as well. We were required to join the temple, and over 40 years and 5 children and 3 grandkids later, we are still members of the Suburban Temple. I recall fondly our relationship with the temple administrator, Lori Resnick, who was so welcoming when we joined the temple, and Rabbi Oppenheimer being so welcoming to the non-Jewish spouse. We also found that we weren't the only intermarried couples at the temple at the time. In fact, the temple was experiencing a wave of new membership from this demographic group. We had wonderful programming for intermarried couples, and we all benefited greatly from hearing stories of both the Jewish and non-Jewish spouses about their respective Jewish and non-Jewish journeys. The group helped me so much to empathize with Nancy's religious background and beliefs. I had a real hard time with the Christmas tree in the house, but after listening to the young men and women in that group, I empathized with my spouse, and it was much easier after that. On my first high holidays after we were married, I returned to my seat next to my father at the Warrensville Center Synagogue. When it came time for the rabbi's speech, he chose the topic of the ills of intermarriage. And that was the last time I set foot in the Warrensville Center Synagogue. One major hurdle that I faced personally was a vast difference in worship services between my Orthodox shul and the worship services at Suburban Temple. Where were the Europshires and where was the music? No one was really encouraged to sing back in those days. But what I found was that over the years, I really gained an appreciation for the choral music, and learned the sounds. I love the cello and kol nidre, and there's a concept, a Jewish term known as kavana, which is used to describe the intensity of worship, which literally means intention or sincere feeling of heart. And so I realized my Jewish journey, I had to relearn my kavana for the Reformed service, which I was able to do. I was able to do by listening to the beautiful selections, which continue today. So the line was pretty clean between the Warrensville Center Synagogue and Suburban Temple, but my journey would only include one other meaningful one other endeavor. When my dad passed away in 1999, I decided to honor him by saying Kaddish for an 11-month period required by Orthodox tradition. I got up every morning at 7 a.m. and went to B'nai Yeshurun and put on tefillin and said Kaddish. It was a wonderful way to honor my dad, and I'm really glad I did it. Nancy and I were blessed with 5 wonderful children: Sarah, Emily, Abby, Adam, and David. And to be honest, I really needed the Suburban Temple to be my partner in raising my children in the Jewish faith and imprinting Jewish identity on their personas. As I look back on my parents passed away at a fairly young age, but they were able to share in many wonderful simchas, including baby namings, consecration, and my oldest daughter Sarah's bar mitzvah, where my dad walked from University Heights to be here to share the tradition of passing down the Torah from generation to generation. I think they still do that today, don't they? Yeah. Bar and bar mitzvah services were a relatively new thing brought to the temple by Rabbi Oppenheimer. But as I look back on my Jewish journey, one of the real blessings of my life is the presence of Linda Wolf as a bar and bar mitzvah teacher. I take it many of you have had that experience as well. Okay. She taught all 5 of my children their Torah portion, how to lead the service, and how to prepare a speech. We had just moved to Solon when my daughter Sarah was going into the 7th grade, and she was really upset that I had uprooted her from her friends. Quite frankly, the only time I saw her smile that entire year was coming out of Mrs. Wolf's house after her bat mitzvah lesson. My daughters Emily and Abby had the same enjoyable experience preparing for bar mitzvah with Mrs. Wolf, always coming out of Mrs. Wolf's house with a piece of candy and talking about her cute doggy Koosh. Okay, so after 3, I'm sorry this is so long. Okay, after 3 bar mitzvahs, we then challenged Mrs. Wolf with the task of a double bar mitzvah of my sons Adam and David. Adam, quite frankly, could have been a rabbi at age 13. He was smart, articulate, and social, and when you put that young man in a suit and let him give a speech, you could swear he was the next coming of Rabbi Abba Hillel Silver. Getting Adam to the finish line was the easy part. David, on the other hand, was a little tougher assignment in that he struggled with attention and learning issues. Mrs. Wolf worked her magic, and on that day, on the day of Adam and David's bar mitzvah, B'nai Mitzvah, May 26, 2007, clad in suits and talesim, they had a beautiful bar mitzvah journey. To me, this is one of the my favorite memories of my Jewish journey. And as the temple was packed with friends and family, I just remember looking at my wife and telling her, this is so cool. I'm so grateful for Linda's effort in helping me raise the children. Okay? Then, let's see. Then Rabbi Bram came along, and we hadn't even met him, but our daughter's Emily's bar mitzvah was going to be in a month from when he started. There was a real clean cutoff of when he was to start. Anyhow, so I had asked him if he could expand the aliyahs to from 1 to 3, which he eventually did, and allow us to use our own words in our speech to our children. So that was great, and that was a beautiful experience. And then the kids all went through confirmation, and they enjoyed the experience. But I was concerned about my son Abba, Rabbi Hillel Silver over here taping this, okay? And I was concerned about my son, who had become quite a free thinker, and wondered if he will be able to see the value of going to temple. So I asked him about his confirmation class, expecting him to comment about how boring it was. And he said, Dad, Sarah's stash hour is really cool. And I really like Rabbi Van and Rabbi Shauna. So when Rabbi Van emerged on the scene, we have been so privileged to have her officiate at 3 Jewish weddings and 3 baby namings, and they've all been done under a chuppah of love, always topped with my father's tallis. And I'm so grateful that I was allowed to sing the Sheva Brachot at these beautiful wedding services. Truly such beautiful services. 3 of our children are now members of Suburban Temple, Kol Ami, and 4th will be soon, as soon as I write out a check for her. I am very happy our grandchildren, Teddy, Benji, and Flora, who are here today, I hope they'll have the same experience as well. One quick shout out to Deb Rogers, who provided me with the opportunity to sing in the Temple Choir, and for bringing such joy to singing at the Suburban Temple worship services. As I look back on my 2-part Jewish journey, I'm so very thankful for the warm upbringing in the traditional Jewish faith, but my journey would not have been so fulfilling if not for Suburban Temple-Kol Ami and my partner Nancy and I raising our children and having an enriched Jewish life. Thank you, Rabbi Van, for providing me with this opportunity to go back down memory lane on my Jewish journey. And thank you all for listening to this rather lengthy speech.
gifts, sing along if you know it, and we are blessings. We are history in song. We are hope, and we are healing. We are learning to be strong. We are words, and we are stories. We are pictures of the past. We are carriers of wisdom, not the first and not the last. Ledor vador nagid God lecha. Ledor vador, we protect this chain from generation to generation. Ledor vador, these lips will praise your name. Looking back on the journey that we carry in our hearts, from the shadow of the mountain to the waters that would part. We are blessed and we are holy. We are children of your way, and the words that bring us meaning, we will have the chance to say. Ledor vador nagid God lecha. Ledor vador, we protect this chain from generation to generation. Ledor vador, these lips will praise your name.
Howard, thank you. As always, you tell a great story. Our next speaker is Diane Green. Many of you know Diane from welcoming us into the sanctuary for many, many years. Diane has also been attending Torah study since its beginning, right? So 18 or so years. So Diane, thank you. Do you want to stand up or do you want to stay seated? Okay. You teach classes, you're good. You might need to, let's move this over for you.
I don't teach with a microphone.
You want to stand over here so you're not, wherever you want to be.
Can you hear me? You're not supposed to say that in a microphone, right?
Let's move it down a little.
Okay. I have a loud voice anyway. So when I met with...
We actually need the microphone for the people on
Oh,
Zoom.
sorry.
So it's not about us, it's about them.
When I met with Rabbi Oppenheimer to discuss joining the temple, he asked me why I was here. And I told him that I was Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, that I had been searching for something missing in my life, and I was pretty sure I'd found it right in my backyard. I was born Jewish, mother's Jewish, father's Jewish, all the ancestors, as far as I know, Jewish. All the neighbors were Jewish, and 99% of my elementary school, Roland, was Jewish. Some of my first memories, though, were of Jewish memories, are of Sunday school. And when I thought about these times, I called my sister and I asked her what she remembered, and not surprisingly, her memories are nearly identical to mine. We loathed Sunday school. Everybody I know, nobody liked Sunday school, and those that had to go to Hebrew school didn't like it either. But for my sister and I, it was different. It was temple. It was our temple. My mom was always proud of saying that we were charter members of the congregation, but for my sister and I, we never felt welcome. We never felt like we belonged. We never experienced that sense of community. Quite the opposite. Temple for us was all about money. High Holidays was this endless display of new Cadillacs and fur coats and jewelry. And children were not really welcome at the adult or morning service, so we'd be dropped off in the afternoon for the children's only service. No adults, children only. And the rabbi actually told the parents that if your children can't sit for the hour-long service, don't bring them. Holiday dinners at my aunt's, not much different. There'd usually be a pretty good crowd, and I'd walk in, and women who hadn't seen me in a year or so would pinch my cheeks. Actually pinch my cheeks. My sister and I were usually the only children there at a fairly adult dinner, so we were well schooled in children should be seen and not heard. And as we got older, it was young ladies should sit quietly and eat properly. One Passover, my uncle actually reprimanded me at the table for eating my gefilte fish with my salad fork and not my fish fork. Really? My dad and I laughed about that for years. I remember one Simchas Torah when I was in grade school. The sanctuary was full. And we had our flags and our apples, and all the men were parading around with the Torahs, and the rabbi was calling up all the men in the congregation that were there. And I was really excited. I was really proud. My dad was going to carry the Torah. And after this, a long while, the parade ended, and the rabbi never called my dad. My sister and I did not become bat mitzvah, and for all the religious significance of confirmation, for us it was simply graduation from Sunday school. I did have other Jewish experiences. In the summer when I was 12 and 13, I was sent to Chabad camp. The reasons have absolutely nothing to do with me or religion. I was sent with a friend, and needless to say, we were the only non-Lubavitchers in the camp. Okay. Now, this is the early 70s, and women around the world are fighting for equal rights. And here I was with these counselors from Crown Heights, Brooklyn, who were only a couple years older than me, but I was sure were setting women back hundreds of years. I would argue with them constantly about their lifestyle, and while I'm sure that they learned absolutely nothing from me, I did learn a few things from them. I learned to read Hebrew. I learned about tzedakah, and not money, but chesed, acts of loving kindness. I learned the meaning and significance of holidays, those I knew, and plenty I had never heard of. And several times over the summer, we would go to Rabbi Alevsky's home for Shabbos dinner. I'm not really sure we were invited, but we were always welcome. And there was study and discussion around the table, mostly the men. But between the courses, the rabbi would start tapping his hand on the table, and he'd start singing, and then everybody around the table would be singing, and it was really joyous. And I thought, this is Shabbos. When I was in high school, I was also a member of B'nai B'rith, BBG, Big Busted Girls. I can assure you we were much more concerned about that than the required Jewish programming. But we would plan and attend events with AZA, with our male counterparts. But mostly we were getting stoned and doing the nasty, but our mothers believed that we were meeting nice Jewish boys. Let's see. I started dating my ex-husband when I was in college. Yes, he was Jewish. Actually, he was a Gino, Jew in name only. The first time he was ever in a temple was his best friend's wedding. His family celebrated the secular holidays, Christmas and Easter, and since temple held no real meaning for me, we never joined. My brother-in-law, on the other hand, is Asian, and he was part of our family for many years, and when my father passed, my mother asked the rabbi if he would marry my sister and brother-in-law. And so they met with the rabbi, and he requested that they took classes and they did other things, and they fulfilled all that he had requested, and about a month before the wedding, they found out, in fact, that no, the rabbi would not marry them. The reason he gave, he had his reputation to consider. When I was 12, my dad had a stroke. He lost his eyesight to glaucoma before I turned 16, and since there were no ADA laws, he was forced to retire and suffered major depression before I graduated high school. And in that roughly 6-year time, the rabbi never came to the house. Nobody from the temple ever came to the house. No phone calls, no well-wishing cards. My sister and I did not become bat mitzvah, as I said, and confirmation had no meanings for us. And then after the rabbi refused to marry my sister, I just thought that if this is what Judaism is all about, I wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. And I had nothing to do with it for about 10 years. In the early 90s, Marcus, my son, was born. I got divorced, and my mother died. And alongside the emptiness in my heart, I kept having this nagging feeling that something else was missing. So to fill the void, I dabbled in Eastern philosophy and meditation and mysticism. And at the time, Marcus was attending daycare in the home of a Black Baptist minister and his wife, affectionately known as Auntie and Uncle. And Uncle used to take Marcus to the church to play the drums. And Auntie and I used to have long discussions about spirituality and religion. And I also believed that Marcus should have some foundation in religion. And Auntie had a lot of suggestions, including Jews for Jesus. So one night we were at the church listening to Auntie sing, and it hit me. Marcus could go to church, but I couldn't go with him, not spiritually. Praying to Jesus was just something I could never do. And there it was. I'm Jewish. It's in my DNA. As a single mom with no family in the area, the only way I knew to give Marcus a foundation in Judaism was to join a temple. Only now I had an idea of what I was looking for, and so I called around the various temples, and they told me to call back after the holidays. And then I called Suburban. And Lori Resnick invited me to High Holidays. She said, I'll leave you tickets, and please bring Marcus to the family service. And you have to get in right away to see the rabbi so that Marcus can start Sunday school in time for consecration. And so we met with Rabbi Oppenheimer, and after I told him that I was Dorothy, he took Marcus by the hand, showed him around the Sunday school and the sanctuary, and they became pals, and we joined the temple. And I have always felt welcome. I've always felt wanted. Nobody looks at my car or my clothes or my checkbook. And Marcus has thrived here. He loves Sunday school. We developed our traditions at home, and he is passing those along to his kids. And over the years, I've been invited to offer the candle blessings in Kiddush. I've blessed and read from Torah. I've given davars. And one time I even got to blow the shofar. And Rabbi Van invited me today. And I have, every time I think about what was and what is, and I am truly honored and thankful. And thanks to Rabbi Bram, I became bat mitzvah with the first B'nai mitzvah class. And yes, you can say I'm a charter member of Torah study. And it's my Torah study pals that highly encouraged me to fulfill one of my bucket list items, and last year I earned my master's in history. And in working on this talk today, I realized that without ever planning it or intending, 6 of the 10 final papers I wrote for my courses and my master's paper all had Jewish themes. And so in the end, what was missing in my life was never really missing. Judaism was always in my backyard, and I always had the power to go home. But just like Dorothy, I had to figure that out for myself.
Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a dream that you dreamed of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly, and the dreams that you dare to, this version is weird, dream really do come true. Whoops. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where trouble melts like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh why can't I? No, I was downloading it from the internet while we were.
Deb finds the perfect song again. Diane, thank you. One of the incredible things about this time together is the willingness to share the truth and the vulnerability of our stories. And I really, it means so much to me for you to share that story. And yes, I did cry, so thank you. Our next speaker, Mark Heller, has the one privilege is married to Sarah Stashauer, who's already been mentioned in a story as our confirmation teacher and past president. Mark, all the stories in my head are deeply personal of taking care of my kid. So Mark has been a member here for 20-something years. And is really great with my child. So that's a big deal if you know my child. And thank you, Mark, for saying yes to offering this story.
Bye. A Jewish Journey. I like this title for a couple of reasons. First, it's alliterative, and I like alliteration. It subtly knocks on the back door of your frontal cortex to announce that what follows is important. Second, it's a journey. It doesn't connote a destination. It's a continual odyssey with endless possibilities and opportunities to learn and experience. So here's my prologue. Your past Temple president and I live in a 16-unit community in Cleveland Heights. It so happens that 5 of the unit owners are suburban members. This past Rosh Hashanah, one of those owners invited a neighbor who happens to be Jewish but not a Temple member to attend morning services. The next day, our association had its annual kosher, only kidding, clam bake to close the pool for the season. As I was standing over the pot of melted butter, I happened to find myself next to that invited guest. I asked him how he liked the service because I thought it was pretty great. He said he enjoyed it but really liked the building and grounds more. He then asked me if I was a religious Jew. I said, funny you should ask that because next week there's this thing at Temple between morning and afternoon services where 4 congregants get to personally explore that question. I said, 2 weeks ago, I would have answered that I considered myself a secular Jew. But when the rabbi called to ask me to be part of this session, I had to think about that question in some depth. And here's what I think now. I believe that my and our Jewish journey is comprised of 4 parallel paths. See what I did that's alliteration. Those paths being religion, history, culture, and spirituality. They each contribute to the sum of our Jewishness. When I think of that in that context, I don't know if I'm deeply religious, but I can assert that I'm very Jewish. As I recall my history as far back as I can remember, I've been Jewish. And if you consider my bris, which I'm sure I attended, I've been Jewish beyond my conscious memory. Now, here's my journey. The first 5 years of my life, I lived in Colchester, Connecticut, on a chicken farm. And I know Dennis Lehman can relate to that. A very large chicken farm. More to the point, it was an egg factory. Huge coops, egg sorting machinery, packaging, and shipping to the wholesale distributors in several states. My family lived in an upstairs apartment of the main residence, and my grandparents lived next door in the downstairs unit of a 2-family. I remember my grandmother killing a chicken, plucking its feathers, speaking to a neighbor in Yiddish, and then making chicken soup. They belonged to an Orthodox shul. The men would pray downstairs, and the women and children would watch from an upstairs balcony. The pulpit was in the middle of the downstairs area, and if I went down to be with my grandfather, he would tuck me underneath his talit. There was a lot of murmuring and chanting, and it seemed that everyone knew where they were in the service, but not me. So my early years were spent in this small rural community, my own little Anatevka. And then, just like Tevye moved his family away from Anatevka, my father moved his family, albeit not under the same circumstances and not bringing a milk cow, to the burgeoning town of Manchester, Connecticut. In the ensuing years, my grandparents would visit us every Friday and holidays, and I remember my grandfather leading Passover services in our new home, seated at the head of the table, reclining on a pillow, reciting the entire service, yes, and even that portion after the meal. And we would often visit them at the farm. Manchester was one of those towns erupting post-World War II. We lived in a 3-bedroom ranch, 1 bathroom, 2 parents, 3 girls, and me. There was 1 temple in town, Temple Beth Shalom, and it was conservative. I went to Hebrew school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and Sunday school on, wait for it, Sunday. The many years of Hebrew school still means that in the Mishkan Tefillah, I can recite the Hebrew easier than I can read the transliteration. To be clear, though, there's been a few letters morph into those I'm not familiar with, and I'm pretty sure my translation acumen is lost. I was involved in all sports in high school, so it was a massive scheduling endeavor going to every game and every temple class. In fact, the most nerve-wracking moment of every football season was looking to see if Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur fell on a game day. If so, would I pull a Sandy Koufax and not play? I don't remember not playing, or perhaps I've conveniently forgotten that they did fall and I played anyway. My bar mitzvah parsha was Korach. And let me stop here and say that I was born in 1948, as was Israel, and as was Suburban Temple. Just wanted to slide in that Suburban 75-year thing here. Korach is the story of this guy and his family inciting an insurrection against Moses and Aaron because he, Korach, thought that they were taking power and prestige for themselves and ignoring the community. It's the original January 6th story. Suffice it to say, God stepped in, and it didn't go well for the rebellion. After my bar mitzvah, I wore a talit, and tefillin for Saturday and Sunday services. And I'm going to talk about that talit a little later on. My high school senior class had 800 students, 8 of which were Jewish. I don't recall any anti-Semitism or standing out because we were Jewish. Maybe we were too naive. For me, the protests and social justice came later in college. The late 60s was a turbulent, if not exciting time. In college, I kind of lost my Jewish touchstones, except for that one religion course I took with a professor who was also a rabbi. Does that count? I was certainly Jewish, but there was so much going on. I wasn't in Hillel or a temple goer. You know, it was the era of Woodstock and Martin, Bobby, and John, Vietnam, Kent State, Joni Mitchell, Bob Dylan, the Eagles, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Simon and Garfunkel, and oh yeah, Motown. I didn't return to a more predictable Jewish life until my first marriage. And yes, Sarah, I was married before. Yep. We belonged to Tifereth, or as we referred to it, Silver's Temple. My first wife's family had a long-standing relationship with Dan Silver, who married us. We became members, attended services. My son and daughter were bar and bat mitzvahed. We were definitely temple members and welfare donors, but I think only on a superficial level. There was no great introspection on what it meant to be Jewish beyond paying your dues. Several years later, after my divorce, your past temple president and I got married. Her family were members of Suburban Temple, and we were married by Rabbi Oppenheimer. But for many years, we didn't belong to any temple. We liked Suburban, felt comfortable here. Its inclusiveness appealed to our sensibilities, but something prevented us from joining. That changed when Rabbi Oppenheimer retired and Eric Bram was chosen to be the new rabbi. And we had dinner with Eric and his wife Debbie at Jack and Ronnie Bailaski's house. We immediately felt a kinship with his warmth and understated intellect, and we became Suburban Temple members. From that moment till today, it's kind of a runaway train, involvement-wise. Sarah became a board member, temple president, and a 50-year-old B'nai Mitzvah. We went to Israel with the temple tour, loved the country, even with all its warts. We adored time spent in Jerusalem, standing on a rooftop and being able to turn 360-degree circle and see the Dome of the Rock, the Western Wall, and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Haifa with its Baha'i Gardens, the Golan Heights, where I called Haifa to have them send my CPAP unit to their next place. And then trekking up Masada with current temple president, Lori Rosenberg, just making it to the top, floating in the Dead Sea, and came to realize that Israel is not only a holy site for the world's 3 main religions, but a historic place, traversed by many cultures from biblical times to the Roman Empire and to today. And now Sarah and I stand before you as chairpeople for a Suburban Temple's 75th anniversary. We are proud of this place and want to ensure that its legacy remains vibrant and relevant for many years to come. So here's the epilogue. I promised you that I would come back to that talit, and I have trouble with that because I used to refer to it as talis, that I got on my bar mitzvah 62 years ago. Part of our responsibility as Jews is to pass along the history and the religion, culture, and spirituality, which is our being. Next month, our grandson and only grandchild is getting bar mitzvahed in Columbus. I still have my tallis. It's kept in a blue velvet bag with my name on it. During Ethan's bar mitzvah, Sarah and I will give him that tallit for him to wear during his service. And whenever to wear during his service, and for him to wear whenever he chooses in the future. It will become his, as will our Jewish journey. He can then choose to pass it on to those he loves in the future. Thank you.
Does anybody need one of these? Thank you, Mark.
Tradition, the papas. Tradition, the papas. Tradition. Sorry, don't clap. Oh my gosh. Sorry, I didn't have the chords.
So we say in Hebrew, acharon, acharon, chaviv, last, last, and most beloved, because going last is always hard. So it is my pleasure to invite, she's already up here, Susan Orpit Long to share her answer to the question, what is the impact of Judaism on my life? And I, Susan, how long have you been a member? Okay. Okay. So I'm going to just let you talk. And you don't have to stand if you don't want to,
Yeah, but I'd rather. Is this on?
It should be on.
Okay.
Make sure that you're...
Yeah, Jacob says yes.
Okay, but you've got to put it in front of your mouth so that
That's
people
too
on Zoom
bad.
can...
Okay, so seen chronologically, my Jewish journey is not unique, and I'm not as funny as these other guys. So, I've warned the rabbi that, somebody from my generation, raised in the Midwest, basically a Reform Jew, what did I have to say? I lived in a predominantly Catholic neighborhood through 8th grade, attending Sunday school, then moved as I started high school to a somewhat more Jewish area outside of Chicago. I was confirmed. I went to college where I spent high holidays and Passover Seders, sometimes at Hillel, but more often with my roommate who lived within an hour or so of campus. And I met Bruce and fell in love with him, a red-haired Protestant, blue eyes, also from Chicago. Well, when we decided that we wanted to be together, we didn't think that the difference in our upbringing would be easy, as plenty of people were happy to tell us at the time, including some rabbis who discussed that already here today. But we made the commitment to be mutually respectful, mutually supportive, and to raise our children to have knowledge and a comfort level with both. I'm happy to report that so far we have been successful with this approach for 50 years of marriage, despite some challenging times. So I decided a more interesting approach to the story would be to maybe take some key memories, and this flips the question a little bit. More like what in Judaism has shaped me, which is a little bit different than the way the rabbi put it. Memory one, Santa Claus. My parents were pretty smart. We lived in this mainly Catholic neighborhood. When I was about 6 or 7, Santa was coming to visit every home, at least every home where the parents paid the homeowners association for the gifts that he was distributing. And my brother and I were very excited. Santa Claus was coming because our friends had told us about this. And my parents broke it to us. Santa was not coming to our house. And we were crestfallen. They explained that we were Jewish, and just as we didn't have a tree and we didn't have all those twinkly lights at Christmas time, we didn't celebrate Christmas, and Santa Claus was not coming. My mom's here, by the way, and she can correct the details later on. So they assured us we would get gifts at Hanukkah, small consolation when everybody else was getting gifts from Santa Claus, right? What made it possible for my brother and me to hold our heads up was that they told us they would tell us a secret. We couldn't tell our friends because it would spoil the holiday. We didn't want to spoil their holiday for them. Santa Claus is not real. He's just a neighborhood person dressed up to look like all the stories. What a way to feel special. We had a truth that the other kids didn't know. We were way ahead of them. And as an important side note, there were a few other Jewish families in this neighborhood. And along with knowing how we were different, we also knew we had a people, a group that we belonged with. Memory two. I actually have a couple of good memories of Sunday school, mostly neutral. But 5th grade, my parents thought deeply about what Judaism meant to them. When I was in 4th grade, they left a temple that they had helped to found because it had become increasingly conservative, and they were eliminating their English language Sunday school education and leaving only Hebrew school, which did not fit with, especially I guess my dad's idea of how he wanted to raise his kids. So they joined a Reformed congregation further from home. It was there that I had my first inspirational Sunday school teacher. That was Mr. Siegel. He was a small business owner. He was not a professional, he was not a clergy person, he wasn't even a teacher. But he asked questions. He let us think. He raised ethical questions. We learned that stories could have multiple interpretations. My 10th grade class leading to confirmation was also intellectually challenging, with social justice added to the mix by Rabbi Shapiro. That year included a field trip to see the inner city. When I got home, I told my parents that I understood the importance of bringing suburban kids to have that experience, to see that everybody didn't live like we did in the suburbs. But I also told them that I disliked being taken on a bus through neighborhoods as though we were tourists at a zoo. There had to be a better way to engage with people with different backgrounds. Memory 3, Japan. No Japanese music, please. I applied to be an exchange student through the AFS program at my high school and was sent to Japan. This was not, in those days, the Japan of high-tech video games and computers and so on. This was Japan coming out of recovery from World War II and making a name building cameras and just about ready to start influencing the world's auto market. I lived with a Buddhist Japanese family for a year. I attended a private Christian girls' school with my host sisters, and when I couldn't understand the Japanese in the required morning chapel service, I read the bilingual New Testament that was in the book holder in the pew. I also attended high holiday services at one of the 2 synagogues in Japan at the time, the one in the city where I was living. They were Orthodox services, which I had never attended before, but at least frequently attending conservative services with some of my high school friends had given me a bit of preparation to understand what was happening. The European-born president of the congregation was very kind to me, not quite understanding how I could take my shoes off at the door and sit on the floor and do the other things that were typical customs in Japanese homes at the time, at least. But he welcomed me for a Shabbat dinner at his home and blessed me along with his own children. That experience made real for me the teaching that Jews are a people, that wherever you are in the world, despite differences in nationality and opinion and practice, there is a community where you belong. Perhaps Santa Claus redux. I'm a Jew, which makes me different from most of the people around me, but I always have a home in the Jewish community if I seek it out. The last memory I want to mention is a negative one. Bruce and I have worked hard to create a respectful balance in our lives regarding religion, but that balance was shaken a number of years back by thoughtless, insensitive, insulting comments made by a Jewish clergy member in a public setting. This is not Rabbi Ben. That led to my own questioning of the value of my institutional affiliation versus the value of my family. And that's why I said we did leave for a number of years and then came back later on. But family won, and I remain vigilant and wary in my relationships with organized religion. Bruce and I continue to share our lives and religious holidays. We have both always maintained at least a minimal practice of our religions over time. On the Jewish side, lighting candles and saying Kiddush and Hamotzi on Friday nights often brings a moment of peace. Lighting yahrzeit candles for his parents and my dad. It's my turn now. An ethical as well as emotional practice. And in many years, hosting an extended family Seder with cousins from Pennsylvania, California, and other places around the country. Since Passover is my favorite holiday, as I know it is for many of us, these times bring great joy, along with all the work that's involved. The problem with talking about memories, positive and negative, when trying to describe a journey, is that it isn't clear how they add up. How do the dots get connected? Being asked to talk today has encouraged me to think about what it all means. So here's what I've come up with. Firstly, Judaism has always been a key part of who I am, underlying my understanding of my roles as daughter, sister, cousin, wife, mother, and now grandmother. As an anthropologist, as a teacher in a Catholic institution, and as a citizen. Secondly, the values that I hold strongly have been shaped by my Jewish upbringing and education. Intellectual curiosity, recognizing that multiple interpretations of a text or an event can be legitimate and can be respectfully debated. Our responsibility for tikkun olam and speaking out against oppression. The recognition of all people as fellow human beings to whom respectful, ethical behavior is due. Finally, I love to travel. More than seeing the famous sights, it is talking with local people and learning about their lives and worldviews that is gratifying to me. But I can't travel endlessly, even if I have the resources to do so. I need, Bruce not so much, but I need to come home and rest to process the trip. And just as I need to have a home base after traveling, I need a cultural home base. I'm an anthropologist who loves studying other cultures, and I have had a 55-year-long engagement with Japan. As well as I might be able to function, whether in Japan or in Christian America, in moments of great sorrow, it is a Jewish ritual that I crave. In moments of great joy, I want to sing, I want to dance hora. And in moments of deep gratitude, it is the words of the Shahakiano to which I turn. What is it that all of us are so emotional? Thus, my Jewish journey has been an experiential path of learning and increasing recognition of the nature of my ties to my ancestors. Jewish education and ritual provide me with a sense of my place in history and in contemporary society. Judaism offers a meaningful moral code by which to live, and it gives me an emotional and cultural home in the world.
Wherever you go, there's always someone Jewish. You're never alone when you say you're a Jew. So when you're not home and you're somewhere kind of newish, the odds are don't look far, 'cause they're Jewish too. Some Jews live in tents and some live in pagodas. Some Jews pay rent 'cause the city's not free. Some Jews live on farms in the hills of Minnesota, and some Jews wear no shoes and sleep by the sea. Amsterdam, Disneyland, Tel Aviv, oh, they're miles apart. But when we light the candles on Sabbath Eve, we share in the prayer in each one of our hearts. And some Jews wear hats, and some Jews wear sombreros, and some wear keffiyehs to keep out the sun. Some Jews live on rice, and some live on potatoes, or waffles, falafels, or hamburger buns. Wherever you go, sing it with me, there's always someone Jewish. You're never alone when you say you're a Jew. So when you're not home and you're somewhere kind of newish, the odds are don't look far, 'cause they're Jewish too. And the odds are don't look far, 'cause they're Jewish too.
Larry Milder.
Larry Milder. I cheated. I kind of knew what you were going to talk about in advance, so I had that.
So Susan, thank you. That was just beautiful. Every year I think I'm going to be okay. I'm going to get through this without crying, and every year I cry. Thank you so much for these stories, for sharing who you are most deeply, for taking this hour so seriously, sharing yourselves with us. I know that I learned about you and I learned about myself, and that really, thank you, Flora, and that is what Yom Kippur is really about. I cannot thank you enough. A word about that song. Larry Milder, who wrote that song at Camp Harlem when I was a camper at Camp Harlem. So there you go, full circle. We are going to break now. Rabbi Ben Sternman is teaching at 2:30, 2 o'clock. Oh, in 10 minutes. 8 minutes. If you are staying here in the building, Rabbi Sternman is teaching upstairs in 20. No, I get everything wrong. It's that time of the day. I should just let Rabbi Shauna tell us what's happening. At 2 o'clock in the library, come learn with Rabbi Ben Sternman, and then our afternoon service is at 3. Hopefully, I'm going to get this right. 3:45. Yes. Good, because I should be there. Thank you, everyone, so much.